The Other Side of the Coin. By me again! Dean sighed and tapped his empty glass with 2 fingers, catching the bartender's eye for a refill before picking up his ringing phone. "What do you got?" he asked. "Nothing, Dean," Sam said tiredly from the other end. "There's no case here." "I checked out the fountain at the Bellagio. Could be another wishing well situation." "Did you wish for another sandwich?" Sam asked, and Dean could hear the smile in his voice. "Not quite." "Well, has your wish come true?" "No, nothing." "Wishing well seems like kind of a long shot. To run across something like that again?" Sam said. "Well, something is making people's wishes come true, and it's not demons. What did the coroner say?" "Heart attack. Nice, clean, completely human heart attack," Sam said. Dean nodded in thanks to the bartender as he replaced his drink and took a pull from his glass. "I don't buy it." "You don't buy what? That people are finding happiness without selling their souls or something? Stranger things have happened, Dean," Sam scoffed. "Not in this friggin' city. Not without a catch. There's always a catch." Dean waited a moment for his brother to respond, but was met with silence. "Sammy?" "I'm here. I just don't know what else we can look into about this." "There was one other guy who knew the couple with the plane, the bartender at the airport bar." Right, Sam sighed. "I'll go talk to him tomorrow." "Come back to town now." "And do what? Drink myself to death with you in some smoke-filled casino?" "It's Vegas, Sam. That's what you do here." "Yeah," he laughed. "I'm going to pass, but you enjoy yourself. I already got back to the campsite, and I'm staying here tonight." "Hey, Bear Grylls, think you could head back to the room at some point before we hit the road on Monday? I don't really feel like being stuck in the car with you and your patchouli stink all day." "I'm not—" "Never mind. I'll talk to you tomorrow. And Dean, watch your back, because if it is a wishing well deal again and you wish for something more than a sandwich this time, that could backfire on you in a real way." "It's not the fountain, Sam. The wish would have happened by now." "Just be careful," Sam said, and hung up. Dean looked around the place. The bar he sat in was about half full, but the dance floor down a small set of stairs was jam-packed. He could hear the beat of the music with no discernible tune to it, and he watched as people found one another, separating and coming together in a mass of dancing club-goers. The city didn't do for him what it used to, what it was supposed to do. It didn't make him forget or make him feel like someone different. He felt alone and awash in the desert heat, though he was surrounded by people. He felt the years of the job bearing down on him and his shoulders as he sat hunched over his drink. Maybe he'd become cynical. Maybe people really were just finding what they were looking for, and he should let it go. Drive on and put the place in his rear view and let them be. Dean turned in his stool to survey the place and stopped short at the sight before him. Beautiful. Dressed in a plaid shirt, simple for a place like this, and standing from picking up something, shiny and glinting in the bar lighting. "Hell of a place to find a lucky penny," Dean said without thinking. A small smile had risen to his lips as he watched her, and for the life of him, he couldn't figure out where the hell it had come from. "Yeah," she mused, turning the penny in her fingers. It looked brand new. "Yeah, I should take this and try my luck at the horse racing game or something." That's the one at the MGM? The last place on the strip that still takes quarters?" She nodded and gave him a smile. "Maybe," Dean thought as she took a seat beside him. "Maybe." Dean looked over at her again as his shoulder brushed against hers, seeing a bright pink bridesmaid's pin flashing with lights on her shirt. "You here with a group or something?" Dean watched as she took it off and set it in front of her, spinning it with a shy laugh. It made him want to tell her jokes, stories, anything to hear it again. He looked to his drink. He couldn't be drunk already, not this fast, he thought as he listened to her talk about her cousin. She was looking to him, and he reeled for a moment, thinking back to what her question had been. "I'm here with my brother," he said. "Bachelor party?" "No," Dean said, finding himself laughing now too. He needed to tone it down. He took a sip of his drink. "More like an annual trek we make, but lately he's turned it into a camping trip to find himself or his spirit animal or some crap." "That's not what Vegas is for," she said with a smile. Dean stared at her, lifting his glass to toast her, echoing her sentiments, but stopped when he saw her empty hand and offered her a drink. The most natural thing in the world to do. Maybe it was the whiskey running through his veins, but he thought, under the right circumstances, he would offer her anything. A drink would do for now, though, and he marveled when she accepted. When her drink arrived, they toasted to doing Vegas upright, and shortly afterward shared a round of shots. Dean couldn't stop staring, and when he realized he hadn't gotten her name 2 drinks in and asked for it, she just shook her head. "No name?" he asked, raising his eyebrows. "Not in Vegas. Not tonight," she smiled back at him, shaking her head. Dean could tell the words felt unnatural on her lips, that whatever decision she'd made about him and the night in her mind as yet unshared wasn't typical for her. A nice girl, he thought. He caught her eye over his glass as he took a sip, letting the buzz run all the way down his throat, through his body and into his legs, ungrounding him. He thought to the coin he'd tossed in the fountain earlier in the day, just a whim, nothing more. But here, looking back at this girl, maybe. Did you Did you want to go back to my room? She asked quickly in one breath as she looked down at the empty glasses in front of her. Dean raised his eyebrows. He was walking the line between tipsy and drunk. He could tell she was there too. One more drink and it wouldn't be right to say yes. Maybe it wouldn't be right anyway. But he didn't want to leave her side, and he found himself nodding, raising his hand to the bartender to close his tab. Dean took her hand, feeling as though it were the most natural thing in the world, as he led her through the club and out into the main casino. They walked to the elevator, waiting in silence until it chimed and opened up to them. They stepped inside, finding themselves alone, and the doors slid shut. She turned to him at once as if she would lose her nerve if she didn't act quickly, and grabbed the collars of his leather jacket tightly in her fists, dragging him over to her and mashing her lips into his. Drunk. Dean was drunk for sure, he thought, as his body took over. All coherent thought left him as soon as their lips met, and he pulled her to him, kneading her closer. Kneading was the only word for it. He tangled his hands in her hair, turning them both so that he could put her between himself and the wall, get a better hold on her. He urged her mouth open with his tongue, meeting her there in between, tasting her for the first time. Drunk, he thought again. Nothing had tasted like her in history, nor would it again. He pressed his lips to her neck, enjoying the scent of her skin as his nose trailed along it, her hands grasping at the back of his jacket. The elevator doors slid open too soon, and Dean followed her, having no other choice, and she led him down the hall to her room. She was magnetic, drawing him to her even as she did something as innocuous as unlocking the door. Dean had his hands on her hips, her hair, her skin. They made it into the room again, and she kissed him, harder this time, running her hands underneath his jacket. Dean opened his eyes, thinking of how she'd stooped to pick up a penny, something inconsequential and worthless to so many. No one did that anymore. A good girl, he thought again, and broke away when she tried to urge him along in stripping her of her shirt. He kept his hands firm on the hem of it, holding it down. "This is a nice room," he said. It was a weak start, but he had to find a way to stay near her without helping her make this mistake she would be bound to regret. People always regretted Dean. "Yeah," she replied, trying once more to take her shirt off. Dean stopped her and continued to look around. He couldn't look at her, or he would lose all the self-control he was merely clutching at now. "Where are you staying?" she asked. "Somewhere off the strip. I didn't realize places had gotten so ritzy over here," Dean said. "Your hotel doesn't have any amenities?" "Well, we've got color TV," he said. "They put that on the sign out front. It really brings in the tourists." "What about magic fingers?" she asked, and he glanced at her in time to see her smile. That smile. He could feel it just underneath his skin, like something coming that he couldn't quite place. That smile was going to break him in two somehow, and he would let it, he thought, just to see it one more time. She kicked her shoes off and felt the water in the hot tub, flicking some bubbles off her fingers as she removed them from the suds. "You're not getting in like that," Dean said, watching her. "Yes, I'm getting in like this. This is the height of living," she replied, and he walked to her side, holding her hand as she stepped carefully in, fully dressed, and sat down. "Well?" "Oh, this is nice," she grinned, grabbing her cup of champagne from the side of the tub and taking a sip. Dean looked down at her, eyes shining as she reclined back in the water. "Are you getting in?" "Me? No, no," he said. He walked to the window, opening up the curtain and letting the bright lights from the casinos outside shine in. "Anything good happening out there?" she asked from her seat. Dean peered down to the sidewalks and streets below. Cars and taxis drove down the boulevard in lines as if it weren't far after midnight. He could see groups of people walking the strip. No doubt they were getting drunk, finding the next party, never letting the pounding music fade away. Dean turned back to her in the quiet room as she looked expectantly back and shook his head. "Nothing for me," he said, and walked to the couch to sit, taking the remote in his hand. "I knew it," she said, and he turned to look at her. "You only let me bring you up here so you could take advantage of my cable." "You caught me," he smiled. "I like to use the promise of sex with beautiful women to watch late-night infomercials in their hotel rooms." "Classic," she said with a shake of her head and a put-on frown. Dean turned back in his seat and turned the TV on. "Let's see what's on TV after 2 a.m. in Vegas." "Do you believe in palm readings?" She was so close to him, laying inches away on her side with a little space on the bed between them as they lay on top of the comforter. "I believe you're going to read mine whether you know how or not," he replied. "This line here," she continued, and he had to laugh. "This means you would have been extraordinarily rich if you'd only found that lucky penny before me. But you know what? Finders keepers." "My brother used to say that to me all the time," Dean remarked. "Younger or older?" "Younger. We traveled a lot when we were kids, moved to schools a lot, stayed in motels most of the time." "Hence the thread count knowledge," she smiled at him. She was still holding Dean's wrist in her hand as he continued. "At a laundromat one day, I found him sitting on the floor by a machine, holding something in his hand. Kid couldn't have been more than 6. I asked what he had, and he just closed his fist around it like I was trying to take it from him. Told me finders keepers." "What was it?" she asked quietly. "A dollar coin he'd found. He didn't even want it, not really. He had nowhere to use it, but it became a game with us at laundromats along the road, looking for coins. He got so excited about it that I started letting him keep them even if I saw one first. Sounds like you're a good big brother, she smiled. Dean just shrugged at her. What about you, no siblings? Just my lovely cousin, she chuckled. She was quiet a moment, running her finger over his wrist, feeling the pulse beating steady underneath. Right or left side of the bed, she asked. Dean raised his eyes to her from where she was touching him. Left, he answered, before volleying it back to her. Have you ever been in love? She hesitated for a moment, taken aback by the intensity switch of questions. I thought I was before, with that guy, but now... She shook her head, letting the thought go unfinished before continuing their question game. Socks on during sex? Never, Dean replied, but afterward all bets are off. How long are you in town? Just until tomorrow. Tell me your happiest memory. Dean stared at her a while. Her eyes were shut now as she waited for his answer, and he was silent for so long that she wondered if he was dozing off as well. Tell me your name, he finally said in a whisper. They watched the sun rise together from a large boulder out past the highway, yards away from an empty rest stop. She shone with the sun, and he would have rather watched her than the sliver of light growing into a new day in front of him. He'd gotten a name, and it had sounded new to him, like a word he hadn't realized existed, a word he hadn't realized he needed in his vocabulary. They stayed out there in the midst of the desert until the sun was completely uninhibited by the horizon, shining proudly over them and heating the morning up at a rapid pace. I have a flight to catch, she finally said, regretfully, as she looked over at Dean, and he nodded silently. They called for another cab and rode together back into that kaleidoscope city, stopping in front of her hotel. Did you want to come up for a few minutes? She asked as they stood in front of the main entrance. I shouldn't, he said. He'd never leave town if he did, and he could see that she had a life to get back to, a real life. He knew roads wound and twisted, though, and goodbye didn't always mean forever. Well, she sighed, pulling her bottom lip between her teeth. She looked at him a moment before holding her hand out, eliciting a smile from him. Really? A handshake? I don't know, she shrugged, matching his grin. He reached out and took her hand in his, holding it tightly, palm to palm. You take care of yourself, he said, letting his hold linger. You too. Maybe if we're ever both back in Vegas next year or something, she added with a laugh. Yeah, Dean nodded. Maybe. He let her hand drop from his, feeling the loss of it immediately within himself, surprised by the force of the absence. He slid back into the cab to head back to his own hotel, refusing to look back as he drove away. Dean crashed onto his bed back at the motel, feeling the scratchy comforter beneath his face and falling into dreams of her face, her eyes, her lips. A name. He had a name, and he needed to be on his game about this. If it had been the wish, if it had been the fountain, she would find her way back to him and there would be a case. He was sure there was something. He just needed to wait. He slept the afternoon away, finding himself awakening as the evening began. Not 24 hours ago, he didn't know what her face even looked like. It was a strange thought. He made it out to the strip, walking along, making his way through crowds of strangers, and letting his feet carry him from one end to the other. He tried giving Sam a call to see how he'd gotten with his questioning, but received no answer. He nearly gave in, nearly walked right into her hotel as he passed it to ask the concierge about her. If he flashed his badge, the one sitting temptingly close in his pocket, he could have all the information about her he would need to call her up, tell her to come back and make time stop for him again. As it was, he forced his feet to keep walking. He found another bar, a quieter one, and took a seat and a drink as evening turned to night. Dean flipped his phone in his hands as he sat, thinking of her, unable not to. Brittany. Sam had warned him about a backfire, and maybe this was it, that if you let the wish go, it would disappear forever. His stomach lurched at the thought of letting her slip through his fingers and pushed it forcefully away. He nursed his drink before switching to beer. He didn't want to be drunk tonight, not if she ended up swinging through those doors by some miracle. It wasn't until a little after 3 that Dean paid his tab and walked back, slowly down the strip, hands in his jacket pockets, feeling as though he'd been defeated by some invisible monster. He made his way off the boulevard, down some side streets, and around people who had lost their way in every manner of speaking, before he saw the flickering light of the motel he was staying at. He dug the key from his pocket, placing it in the lock and swinging the door open. In the dim light shining in from the parking lot, Dean saw the silhouette of his brother in the other bed, stirring from the sound of the door. I really hope you took a shower, man, Dean chided, reaching for the light. Hey, don't turn on the light. I have someone... Sam started, but it was too late. Dean flipped the switch, filling the room with bright light, and saw that Sam wasn't alone in bed and clothes were strewn along the floor. Dean grinned at his brother as the figure beside him stirred. Wow, so chicks dig the smell of patchouli, huh? Dean teased, letting his keys drop to the table. Just turn the light off, you jackass, Sam laughed. Dean turned to flip the switch again, but stopped when the woman beside Sam rolled over, stretching with a yawn and waking slowly. She turned towards the door and the source of the light and blinked her bleary eyes once, twice, before they snapped wide open. "Dean?" "Brittany," he said in shock. And there it was, the backfire.